Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very, very accomplished professional from the world of entertainment from USA, Roanne Mesirow. Roanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be with you today.
Thank you. Roanne is the founder and chief executive officer of Mezz Entertainment. So, Roanne, before we get into Mezz Entertainment, tell me about your own journey and what brought you to the world of arts and entertainment.
Yes. So when I was younger, I started growing a love of music.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Chicago, and there was a phenomenal music scene there. And that's when I started listening to more hip hop music. And when I was in after college, I was working at the Ace Hotel as an event planner, and a young lady who sat next to me did event production, and she had gone to the NYU Clive Davis Institute for Recorded Music, which is one of the best schools in the world for music artists. And she told me that I would make a very good manager. And it was essentially her idea for me to start going into management. And I started managing her. It was very organic, and I just went with it. I just was like, you know what, I'm going to try it out and see how it goes. And that's really how it started, was with this first client.
And as they said, the rest is history. So
exactly, the rest is history.
Wonderful.
Exactly.
So, when I was reading about you, what came out very clearly was something called a Mezz Effect. And I'm imagining, I'm assuming the Mezz comes from your family name, Mesirow, is it? Do I have the pronunciation correct, or is it?
Yes, Mesirow is my family name, and I had a late cousin, a distant cousin, who was a very, very famous jazz musician in Paris. And his name was Mezz Mesirow. That was his stage name, not his. And so, and he was very ahead of his time. He went against the grain. He did not follow, what societal rules imposed on him. He just did what he wanted and what he thought was right. And he actually was living in Paris for a while and selling marijuana backstage at the jazz clubs. And that was in the 1940s, 1950s. So that was obviously very ahead of his time. And so that's where Mezz comes from, was from his stage name. And so that's how I think. Yeah.
and when you say the Mezz Effect, what do you mean by that?
So it's a term that I created that means that you're unfuckwithable. It means that no one can throw you off. You have a foundation, a strong foundation, and you are just you're standing in your foundation, and no one can throw you off. And it also has to do with believing that you can do anything you want and not having any limitations on you, because there's a lot of people, I think, at least in my experience, that put they hinder themselves. A lot of people that hinder themselves and put limitations on themselves based on what they see around them. And this is just a whole concept where it's just you can literally do anything, and there's no limits, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Fantastic. You also say that we deliver custom brand enhancement, marketing, and world-class strategies that nurture our clients' artistic vision. Help me understand this and give me an example.
Yeah. So, with our clients, what we first do is we look at and analyze where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of our clients are in different places in their career. Some of them might be farther along than others, right? So we have to analyze where they're at in their career. And then we have to get on the same page. Like, we ask the client, what are your goals? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are the main things that you want to focus on? And then we get on the same page about that. And then we put together a plan where of action of how we're going to get it. And we do it in segments. Like, this is the first phase, this is the second phase, this is the third phase. And we figure out, various strategies based on, if they want to focus on social media, we have to put together a plan for their social media accounts and content. If they want to focus on getting more shows, we have to focus on looking at their market and where we should focus on getting them more shows, what cities, what types of venues, whether maybe they're much earlier stages and they need a website built or they need a press kit. So that's what we're focusing on. So it really just depends where they're focused, what they need help with, because all of them kind of need help in different areas. So Mezz is here to fill in where the holes are and what they need help with.
Very interesting. So, a natural question after your response is, what goes into building the brand of an artist?
Yeah. So, first we have to learn their personality. We have to understand them as an individual, because part of my opinion is that if they're going to have longevity in this business, they really need to be an individual and be authentic to themselves. So we need to learn, what is your brand? We need to figure, and some artists, they don't know what their brand is. They're still trying to figure it out. So part of this is figuring out what your brand is. And then we have to figure out what the next step is. So maybe if it's a music artist, maybe we need to focus on getting more exposure by performances. It's a DJ, maybe we have to focus on getting more exposure by, larger venues or venues in other states. Maybe it's a producer and we need to put together a beat pack and send it out to people to see if they want to use any of those beats for one of their artists. So we really have to take whatever stage they're on, and how do we build from there? And what is the next step? And also it's about what is most important to the artist. Because they all have different goals. It's, this business is very different because the products are people, right? So they're all individuals. They all have their own personalities, right? And they all have their own ideas on what they want their career to look like. So it's not one size fits all.
Absolutely. I agree. But, I was speaking to someone else who does a similar kind of work in India. And I was asking them, what goes into managing the egos, and the sometimes the larger than life persona of senior artists?
Yes.
I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
So yes, most artists do have egos, and they kind of have to, because if they don't believe in themselves, it's really hard to convince other people to believe in them.
Correct.
So, but managing those egos sometimes you just have to feed into it and, just be okay. Like, I think I've gotten to a point where I've accepted, for the most part, that that's just the nature of the business that I'm in. But sometimes you do have to, check them, right? And be like, like, if whoever you're talking to, like, if you knew everything, you wouldn't need me, right? So obviously you may think you know everything.
Absolutely.
But I'm here for a reason, right? So obviously there's some stuff that you need guidance about.
Fascinating.
So things like that.
Very interesting. And what is the process you follow before you decide to take a new client?
I look at well, first of all, I have to like them as a person. Because I've taken this, for me, this is not just a business. This is what lights me up. It's like, it's exciting. I love it. It brings me joy. It brings me fulfillment. So I do have to like the person, at least to some degree. I have to like everything about them, but I have to like them to some degree. And I have to look at their work ethic. They need to have a very, very strong work ethic, because I can't want it more than them. They have to want it more than me. I can't be pushing them, and it doesn't work out well. I've done that before, and it's not enjoyable for either party. So the work ethic has to be there, and they have to be dependable. Like, if they say they're going to do something, they have to do it. That's very, very important. I don't want to be chasing someone all the time for things.
Correct.
And they also have to be, responsive, as well as have a market. Like, I have to see that they are marketable and that there's growth opportunities within whatever they're working on.
Fascinating. Roanne, you also have a very interesting program where you take 30 interns every year. Tell me a little bit about this program and what goes into training an intern.
So it's not like I exactly 30 every semester. To be honest, it varies. Sometimes it can be 25. Well, there have been sometimes where I've had 42. Like, that's, I think, the most I've ever had. So it's that range. And the program has grown quite a bit over the last few years, where there'll be semesters where I'm like, was a semester where I got over 480 applications. And that's because due to COVID, I made the internship available all over. So I've even had interns who are in other countries.
Amazing.
So that has helped with the growth of this program. And, we have 4 different departments, and I have people that work on my team that help manage the interns and manage those departments. I'm very big on team. I could not do this by myself. There's so much that has to get done on a daily basis, and I have a phenomenal team.
Amazing.
And the internship program has become very, very important to me, because it's not just like, I want to give them an experience that really will get them ready for future endeavors.
Correct. So,
sorry, go ahead.
My follow-up question to you is that, what are the areas that the interns need inputs in? I mean, I'm assuming that if it's music, then they are all good musicians.
No, not really, actually. They don't need to be musicians, actually. I'm not a musician. So what I'm looking for is people so we have different departments. So, for example, the digital department, I'm looking for people who can take photos, can edit photos, can take video footage and edit video footage, can do graphic design for flyers, building websites. I'm looking for social media managers who work on building social media content and managing accounts and building the engagement for those accounts. I'm looking for people who are pitching to brands for brand partnerships or clubs for the DJs or, you know, maybe getting press for our clients. So pitching to blogs or online magazines, things like that. And then we have the A&R department that focuses on managing the Mezz playlist because we have a Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube playlist. So they don't have to be a musician. They just have to love music. And there's so many different areas. I've had, you know, people who are business majors, communications, digital marketing, PR, computer science. There's so many different majors that I've had.
Interesting. There is also a lot of discussion and conversation going on about how technology is changing music. And of course, then there's this newfound things of the blockchain and the NFT and the metaverse. Are you doing any work with any of your musicians in this area as well?
Yes. So I actually have a few clients that are actually visual artists. They have created NFTs with some of their pieces. And I find it very fascinating. And I have another client who's going to be creating an NFT where, you know, if someone buys it, because they're a producer as well. So if you buy the NFT, you get access to a free like beat, you know, or if it's like an artist, you know, they can have a beat from this big producer. So that's something we're working on as well.
Fascinating. And of course, then this entire thing of the metaverse, which is taking the world by storm, I'm sure you must be working on developing your artists in this whole new universe that's coming in 3 dimension.
Yes. You know, it's working with there's several companies that are building cities, you know, or hotels in the metaverse, and, you know, working with them to make sure that they have my artists there to perform once their city or their hotel or their club is finished being built in the metaverse.
Very interesting. So my last question to you, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation, based on your amazing experience and having worked with so many artists, what would you say are 3 lessons for a budding young artist somewhere in the world who will listen to us as they start their careers?
So the first one is you have to always vouch for yourself and bet on yourself. And because if you don't believe in yourself, it's going to be really hard for other people to believe in yourself.
Correct.
Number 2 is you have to find at least one person who you can trust, who will help you grow your career and who's loyal. And it's not most people when they're starting out, it's usually a friend or a family member, someone that they've already known for some time. Because you can't do this alone. You need someone with you. This is a very difficult industry. And then the third thing is be flexible. Things may not work out the way you think, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to be amazing. Being open to the universe and what comes into your world, and not like you can't just be like only one way, like, because other things may come that you weren't expecting, that it's important to be open to, because there's not one right way to do this business. So you have to be open-minded.
Well said. So I got to ask you one more question. I thought this one was my last, but as you were talking, I was thinking that, artists go through highs in their careers and lows in their careers. What happens and how do you support an artist when they are going through a low?
It's really just about showing up and being as caring as I can, and asking, what can I do to help? How can we get through this? Being solution oriented. Don't focus on the problem. If you focus on the problem, it just gets bigger. If you focus on the solution and how we can get through this and make the situation better, then we will be headed towards the solution.
Very interesting. And on that note, Roanne, thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for your amazing lessons. Always vouch for yourself or believe in yourself. Find at least one person who you can trust, who is loyal to you and who will be at your side. And third one you said was be flexible. Things may not always work out, but things will all, as they say, this too shall pass. Thank you for speaking to me about your journey, about Mezz Entertainment, about the Mezz Effect, about how you are handling so many amazing artists and all the great work that you're doing. Thank you again for speaking to me and good luck.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.